What's going on, everyone? Joe here with Good Old Scratch Custom Apparel. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I appreciate everybody that's watching. I hope you're all doing wonderful. Make sure you subscribe, like, and comment. That brings us to today's video, which actually was a comment on my last video asking, how do you come up with pricing? And to give an example, everybody does a different way of how they determine what the price would be for their good, depending on if they're just doing a one-off or maybe a couple garments, or if they're doing a bulk order. These kind of vary depending on how many shirts you're getting, the equipment you're using, the time spent on all of it. So I'm just going to give you a breakdown that I came up with for a cost of a single one-off shirt from start to finish, how I would break down the cost. All right, so number one, cost of materials. So keep track of everything you're using for that shirt. So starting with the shirt itself, what did that cost you? Usually blank shirts, depending on where you get them, will range between $1.50 to $7 or above, depending on the quality. So for a standard shirt, I'm just going to pick $5. Okay, so you have your $5 startup. The heat transfer material that you're using, depending if you're using vinyl, screen print transfer, DTF, those kind of things you also have to calculate and factor into. So let's say the vinyl or transfer costs $2 in this scenario. Then you're going to calculate in other supplies, if you're using inks, pre-treatment, the tape, weeding tools, the packaging, things like that you also kind of want to put into that bottom line. So in this case, I'm going to say 50 cents. In total so far for my cost is $7.50. The next thing you're going to factor in is the labor cost. And here's where a lot of people kind of undercut themselves. You're your own employee, or if you have employees, you're paying for their time. You're paying for your own time. So you have to factor in the time spent creating each shirt and how much you want to get paid for your time. I kind of look at this from what the customer's expectation is. Now, if they just ask me for a design, I have to consider, am I creating this design? Are you providing me the artwork? That is kind of where you want to start from ground zero, is how much time is that going to take if they're asking you to create the artwork? If you're creating the artwork, you do want to set an art setup fee, and that might be something that you factor into the total or a separate offering or charge that you have for your customer. Okay, so for this, I'm going to say I want an hourly rate of $20 per hour. So time spent on the shirt, that's the other thing you have to factor. I'm not talking about the art setup fee. Let's say you got that already squared away. What is the time from when it's put into the RIP software to sent to your vinyl cutter or sent to your printer, all the way to the weeding and then to the heat application? So these are what you want to factor in. I'm just going to put roughly from start to finish 10 minutes. 10 minutes. I want $20 an hour for myself. So that's 1/6 of an hour, right? 10 minutes. So what you're going to want to factor in, that hourly rate. So 20 divided by 6, because it's 1/6 of an hour, right? 10 minutes. So that's going to calculate to roughly $3.33. So $3.33 for labor cost. The next part is your overhead cost. So your overhead costs are ongoing expenses like equipment maintenance, keeping up on your heat press, your cutter, replacing blades, printers, ink, all that thing factored into equipment maintenance, utilities. If you're working at home like I am, you have electrical and your workspace. Then the other thing is the software you're using. If you're using Adobe Creative Cloud, you're paying a monthly fee, some other softwares, whatever you're using. So the estimated overhead per shirt is around $1 to $2 depending on your setup. So in this case, I'm going to say my overhead is $1.50 per shirt. The fourth part is profit margin. Now, I'm not talking about labor costs. Again, you're paying yourself per hour as an employee. But now, how much profit margin do you want to make per shirt? A typical profit margin for custom shirts range from 30 to 50% or higher depending on the smaller orders. This is where you got to determine where you want to make the money or how much you're going to be able to make off of each shirt. But again, they typically range around 30 to 50%. Formula would be materials plus labor plus overhead times the markup percentage. So that's what you'll have to factor in. So those first 3 steps times the markup percentage that you want to work with. All right, so what we have so far, I hope you're following along and this makes sense, is $7.50 for the materials plus $3.33 for the labor plus $1.50 for the overhead, which equals $12.33. Profit margin, I'm just shooting high, say you want 50% profit margin. So you would take that $12.33 and multiply it by 1.5, which equates to $18.50 a shirt. Okay, $18.50 for a custom shirt. Now let's just kind of go to market expectations. Round up for simplicity. For a custom shirt, typically price ranges are single order shirts, $20 to $35 per shirt. That $18.50 is around the ballpark of what a custom shirt would be anyways. With bulk orders, this is where you have maybe 10 plus shirts. You can mark each shirt down to about $12 to $18 per shirt, depending. Things to factor into that bottom line as well that might change. Again, this is just the example I'm giving you with a bottom line of $18.50 might be a large to XL size shirt for $5. The materials used might be 1 or 2 pieces of heat transfer vinyl. And then obviously the setup with the art, the factoring in the time spent making it and how you're shipping it, the package you're using, everything like that. Now, there's adjustments, variables that come into play, obviously depending on the artwork itself. Again, if you're doing the initial art setup, you might want to consider coming up with a standard fee for the time you spend per half hour or hour on the job if you have to create it from scratch. Now, when it comes to the production side, if you have a design that's very complex, you might want to add a surcharge on that. Now, I'm going to refer to heat transfer vinyl. I can run a roster of names and numbers on my heat transfer or on my vinyl cutter and knock out a bunch of garments for that. All the while, I might have a very intricate design that's going to take a lot longer to cut, might run into some issues on lifting if the detail is too fine, and then you have to factor in the weeding. And if you're doing multiple colors, you have to consider the layering time. That is another thing that you do want to be aware of when you're taking on certain jobs. Then the other part is the rush fees. I pride myself on having a good turnaround time. I typically don't add rush fees, but that might be something if your business is growing and a lot is coming in. We're coming around the holidays, so I know a lot of people are making their presents and gifts. So if you feel like you're overwhelmed and you're trying to figure out, the queue that you're taking the orders from, but somebody's like, I need it quicker and blah, 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 you could add a rush fee to that, which is something that you can consider another 20% to, depending on what the job is and how quick you can turn that around. Discounts for bulk orders, offer lower pricing for higher quantities to attract larger orders. Now, with vinyl, it's a little harder because if it's a ton of these very intricate designs, it's hard to justify lowering the cost. But if you have a printer like a DTF or a DTG or a screen print, and you can just jam out a bunch of shirts real quick, then you can kind of factor that in. But I'm not saying you can't with heat transfer vinyl. You got to factor in the complexity of the artwork, how long it's going to take you to do, because it might not be worth lowering the cost. I hope that made some sense. To recap what I said from the beginning, materials, $7.50, labor, $3.33, overhead, $1.50. In this case, profit margin 50%, $6.17. So the final price ranging from $18 to $20 a shirt for a custom shirt. One shirt. Take that as a baseline, as somewhere to start if you're new to this or trying to figure out how to price your garments or your finished goods. Just adjust accordingly, depending on what the job is. I hope this helped. I really appreciate the questions. Please keep them coming. I want to make more content to help you guys out with your businesses, get you started, make you feel a little more confident with what you're doing. Please make sure that you are following along, subscribe, like, all that fun stuff. I have a awesome new toy coming to my house tomorrow. I'm going to be showing that off quite a bit. So make sure that you are subscribed. Let me know what you want to see. Leave questions, things you'd like me to talk about a little bit more. It helps me out a lot. I appreciate all of you that are watching these videos and following along. I'm getting started. It means the world. Thank you all so much, and keep being a rock star.